Hey everyone, welcome to the Truth Seekers and Trailblazers, to the Bigfoot, Wildman, and Boogers show, the podcast where shadows move, legends breathe, and Bigfoot might be closer than you think. Every week we trek deep into the unknown, diving into the eyewitness accounts, breaking down the evidence, and exploring the mysteries behind North America's most mysterious cryptid. We're here to bring you real encounters and all the wild, weird, and wonderful things that go along with Bigfoot, Wildman, and Boogers. Whether you're a diehard believer, a backyard camper, or just curious, we're thrilled to have you with us. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us grow the tribe and bring more wild encounters out of the woods and into your ears. Now grab your gear, steady your nerves, and let's take the first step into the woods with our guest tonight, Dan Nedrelo. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Doing okay. Looking forward to talking with you.
Well, I'm so glad you could be here with us today, Dan. So you have, well, we've known each other for a little while. Shane Carpenter introduced us a few years ago, and you and I have actually been out on a couple of expeditions together.
Did we have?
We have. So you're a herpetologist, is that correct?
I'm a herpetologist. Okay. I love those animals you hate.
I do remember telling you to keep your snake in the van.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well,
now this is something I got. I was like any other kid. I love dinosaurs. In other words, what is the closest representative of dinosaurs? So crocodiles, giant lizards, big constricting snakes, all that stuff just intrigued me. And I started in third grade. I knew that's what I was going to do in third grade. So I started there.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great that you knew what you wanted to do. Yeah. Exactly. So, Dan, tell me how you got into Bigfoot. So you're a herpetologist, you love outdoors, you love animals, but how'd you get to Bigfoot? How'd you make that leap?
I was in Mrs. Weber's class in fifth grade. And I'm an old guy now. So the date was 1967, which is that famous year of the Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson film. Absolutely. Well, that hasn't surfaced yet. But I'm in class trying to survive, and I've got an intriguing, interesting teacher who's out there and fun. And she says the word abominable snowman, and it's like somebody hit me in the head with a hammer, because I was extremely interested.
Right.
Primates, gorillas, rings, all that. And I just couldn't believe what she said. So I went over to my buddy's place and afternoon after school, looked up in the encyclopedia of abominable snowman. And by golly, if there wasn't the Yeti-Himalaya-Eric Shipton series on the legends in Nepal, I'm like, holy crap, it's in the encyclopedia. And led to another. I started checking out my local library, and lo and behold, I found a book called Ivan T. Sanderson's Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. I own that copy now, and I got it from the library when they let their books go a couple of decades ago. But I checked that book out more than any book that I ever checked out when I was in high school, middle school, and elementary school.
Right.
So, and I'll tell you what the intrigue was. I knew that some adults took this subject serious, and I wanted to know why.
Okay.
And that intrigued me. And the more I read, and actually I didn't get terribly involved with that particular book until after Patty film came out. And I was at a buddy's place, Chuck Hogate, and his dad was out sledding. He comes back and slaps the La Crosse Tribune newspaper on the floor, and it says, America had its own abominable snowman or something like that. And my first reaction was, holy crap. And I'm looking at the newspaper image, and it just resonated with me. And I thought, I don't have to go to Asia. That was the first thing. And then from there, once I got that book, I started going through all the behavioral sequences and the tracks and the descriptions, and it became very logical to me because there was parallel behavior described, and I'm an animal person, so I'm extremely interested in repeat behavior that can be verified, and it was. And once, let's just say it opened a new door.
Right.
From 5th grade on. So, and then from there, I didn't have anything happen until 7th, except there was one unusual thing in 6th grade. One of our local classmates said that his brother got chased by a polar bear. We all laughed at him.
Right.
That didn't surface again for 30 years. But finally, one day, I caught Jeff at McDonald's. And I said, hey, remember that time in 6th grade when you said your brother got chased by a polar bear? And he goes, yeah, I remember that. And he goes, obviously, there's no polar bears in here.
Right.
And I'm like, well, obviously. So he looks at me and he goes, so do you know what that might have been? And I responded, actually, I do. And he goes, are you into that? And I said, far ever no. And he goes, good. And then he gave me 2 local Sasquatch reports.
Oh, wow. Great.
So that was really interesting. And then the next thing that happened was in 7th grade, I was at a church camp in northern Wisconsin. And one night, a group of us in 7th grade with the pastor along a lake edge. Something at that lake edge would not come out of the cover, splashing around, and it made the loudest hiss, which I would compare closest to a bull or pine snake, genus Pituophis. But it was so loud, I'm not saying you could feel it in your body, but it was that loud. It was so loud, you were like, what in the world? And that was one of the things that prompted me to go on and major in Zoology at the university, because I wanted to know what did that. And bear kept coming up, but I could never find a vocal that matched that ever.
Right.
Went until, and I worked with some folks with the Michigan Recording Project. They happened to not only get the vocal, but a couple of the people involved actually got visuals of two Sasquatches trying to knock a raccoon. They were successful in knocking a raccoon out of a tree.
Wow. I bet that was interesting to watch.
Oh, yeah. So those are the things that started to guide me. And I didn't get the favorite book, Apes Among Us, by John Green until I was in my early 20s. But that became the Bible because it just covered all of the United States, and it covered so many incredible claims, some true, some perhaps not. But the point was there was focus and evaluation on footprints, and then Dr. Meldrum surfaces eventually, and unfortunately we just lost him this year. But
yes,
all these things just started coming together. And as far as me, I didn't get anything done with other adults until in my early 20s because I couldn't find somebody who took it serious. There wasn't anybody one person in college, and that was it. And she was from California. She saw footprints in a pond when she was waiting for her dad to change the tire on a vehicle. And she was the only person that I could talk serious about it. So I just sunk this whole subject for years.
Right.
And I continued to keep it sunk, but my photo partner, Al Sheldon, we were publishing and putting pictures in books and magazines and calendars and zoo displays and things like that all over the country and actually the world. And our focus, but we started doing everything from scenics to other wildlife. And but in our travels all over the country, we never found a footprint, and I couldn't understand that. The next thing that came up was my mom passed away in I was 43. I'd just gotten back from Australia 4 years earlier, so I'd been able to travel all over the country and Australia, Tasmania, and in public, working with the Milwaukee Public Museum. Long story short, my sister made me a bet. She said, number one, I bet you don't network studying these giants, and I bet you don't become computer literate. My sister won a bet. So I went online, some questions. I started finding reports of Wisconsin, and I noticed the organization at the forefront at the time was good old BFRO. Started talking with the second man, but right behind Matt, and basically I was bugging him enough where he simply said, "Hell are you?" And, and I told him, and he said, "Have you got a resume?" And so I sent him that. Next thing I knew, I got a password, and I was in the organization, and I was looking at footprints and looking at hair and getting ready to start interviewing all over the country. Matt was great to me simply because he said, "Look."
Hey, Dan,
yeah.
would you, I lost you for just a second there. So would you back up to, you got your password and you were into the flats?
I was in the flats, and I interviewing and looking at all the evidence, and it happened fast. I had to learn how to do simple things like copy and paste.
Right.
But one step led to another.
Right.
It wasn't long before I was invited on some serious trips. If you look up Nedrelo, pheromones, you'll see our Oklahoma expedition in 2001. And then from there, I started hitting private properties around the country because I was interested in. There's got to be a ton of people with these animals, although now I consider them, as the organization does, Aboriginal hair-covered people.
Right.
But they're not all the same, and I'll cover that later. But what's interesting was Matt gave me permission. He said, as long as you don't piss anybody off, I don't care what you do. So I was just like a kid in a candy shop.
Right.
Absolutely going bananas because I had 20 some years of study that I couldn't share with anybody. And now I'm surrounded by 100 people that either have seen them, claim to have seen them, or are so interested in them, they'll talk about them anytime. And some people still I don't communicate with, never did. That's the human nature that we deal with, I guess. Right. So basically I ended up trying to find people that had property activity. And I was doing this in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. But after 4 years of this, I had basically burned out some and was starting to make a few decisions. And so I just kind of, in a sense, left the organization and was ushered out a little bit. And that's okay. I'm quite unorthodox, and I operate now completely different than I did then. But it was such an incredible, amazing learning experience. I hold everybody in high regard, and I just appreciate all the dedication and sacrifices that people made to do what they did. And I'm just honored to have had all the conversations I did and the associations I did. Matt allowed me to help document the 2003 Sasquatch Symposium in California, Willow Creek. And so that I got to finally meet John Green there. I finally got to meet Bob Gimlin, and we became pretty good friends.
That's great.
In 2003, 2004, and numerous other people. One night we got in really late, pitched a tent, and then we had some disturbance outside, and we're like, what in the heck? And it turned Baker and Jim Bobo Face. So they're kind of like getting to meet Jim for the first time. We corresponded a little bit, and then we spent the whole day field tripping with those guys. So I mean, what a wonderful situations to be in to take in so much incredible information.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and
yes.
so basically after that, I went solo, but I would like to talk a little bit about what had happened with some of the one-on-ones with the private properties I worked with.
Okay.
I found out that it was extremely unlikely if you have a grain bin and if you cover the whole thing with oatmeal or something that's going to give for tracks, it's not very likely they're going to run tracks there. I couldn't get people to understand that. So right away, I was already in trouble. So, but we had little things going on. Like, for example, one landowner had a little monkey puppet. And we would put an apple on it and put it on a chair in the granary. And the big male, presumably, came in the apple out and set the little puppet nicely on the chair. And this was repeat. At the time, we thought we had a single lone big male. He had a girlfriend and kids. So that was very interesting.
Yeah.
At the same time I was studying that tribe, I had a single gal in Virginia who suspected she had problems. And my interest was, well, let's see what we can confirm. Because she would get odors, she would get things missing. For example, she'd come home with groceries, have the door open, nobody's around. And she'd pick up and take one set of groceries to the house. She'd come back and the other bag is gone. It's completely gone. What in the world? Finally, we figured because she got a frost. And she kept getting an unusual noise on her window in her bedroom. And basically, we found 17-inch footprints in the frost right outside the edge of the house. So that means we've got a pretty good-sized fella there.
Yeah.
And I suggested to her that she give him a call that was recognizable, that he might even repeat. Eventually, we got recordings of him repeating the call. And in her case, she went with Que Sera Sera from Doris Day.
Okay, yeah.
What was interesting about some of the things that happened was she was having incredible health problems and eventually passed away. But one of the experiences she had was she tried to walk to the river. She couldn't get there, but she got partially there. She turned around and she came back to the house. Then she felt better, and at my urging, I suggested, why don't you go look at your footprints, because you never know. And here, a 12-inch print had stepped in all of her footprint back in the snow, so it was very fresh.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just starting to learn about, back then that many people are well aware of now. For example, food leftovers. Many people are extremely against that. Other people have had no problem with it whatsoever, including myself. Anyway, she proved a point. She took out her best china and laid for them to work with. Raccoons would come in and screw the whole thing up, and then the Sasquatches would come in and clean it up and stack it up really nicely.
Oh, wow.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So as far as what else was going on in Tennessee, Matt hooked me up with a good friend of mine who happened to be the head engineer for the Mississippi Queen and Riverboat. Ricky Idlet. So anyway, Ricky and I became pretty good friends, and that was in 2002. We're still buddies, which tells you the significance of the associations that you have and why, we all have differences on interpretations of what they are, what they aren't, what they do, what they don't do. And many people get all bent out of shape over that. I look at it as an incredible mystery. Let's just learn more. And I try to flip so I can find out what's going on. What does that mean? Why did this person say this? Are they a little bit less than honest, or do they have something really cool going on? And I ended up in Tennessee with Ricky. We hung out. One of the first things that happened was that the landowner, she took us up to the hill and showed us where a big rock, say 20 pounds plus, had been lifted out of the stream bottom because of the moss on it and put at the entrance of a small cave. And if you sit on this rock, you can look down the hill without being seen. So whoever sat there could have complete visibility of all the activities on the domestic scene with the house and the shed and the barn and the chicken coop and all that. In the meantime, as you sit there, one of the things you notice on a hot day was you got cool cave air coming out of the cave at your back. Yeah. So what a perfect, thoughtful, wonderful situation.
Right.
So these are just a few of the little things that I learned, and it got very exciting over time because I was, but the biggest problem was I never got a visual. Did I have a chance at a visual in Tennessee? We were all standing around a pond, and off to my left there was a big ravine, and presuming a branch snapped that sounded like gunshot.
Oh wow!
And I froze. All your hair is on end.
Yep.
And I did not take the opportunity to run over to the edge and look down. And I wouldn't have necessarily seen anything, but I blew my chance there.
Right.
And was that a Sasquatch? I didn't see it. I haven't seen the sound makers, so what else is going on. Right. Another situation there, we were sitting on the porch, and all of a sudden one of the Dobermans is head up, looking out over at the stream bottom. It's a dry bed, and all of a sudden you can hear it snapping branches. It's coming down the stream bed, and it comes all the way toward the end, to the closest with us. This is daylight.
Right.
Then nothing. We're sitting there, nothing. Then as long, the branches start breaking, and off it goes, and it heads back down the dry run. So Will we observe that? I think so. And regarding the reaction of the dog, minimal, just attentive, and that's it. And there's a reason for that, because when we started that study, the way they found out they had presence was one night there was a disturbance at the chicken coop. And so Dad, Mom, and the Dobermans went out. Only one of so many Dobermans would follow. The others weren't going.
Yeah.
And the dad's like, well, that's peculiar, because they had just moved in from Alaska. So they had experience of grizzly, all the Alaskan stuff, big moose. Now they're just in little Tennessee. First thing that happens is, as they approach the chicken coop, they notice greenish eyes on top of the roof. Well, that's easy. That's got to be bobcat, because it's reflecting off our flashlights.
Right.
All right, we got a bobcat problem. And they get a little closer, and all of a sudden they realize there's another problem. Where those eyes are, there's no chicken coop. Now they're 8 feet off the ground, and there's no chicken coop.
Right.
And they're like really confused now.
Yeah.
And a couple more steps, and all of a sudden, crash. It turns and runs and demolishes the fence that runs through. And they're standing there blinking their eyes going, the only thing that could do that is a grizzly, and we don't have grizzlies in Tennessee. Right. So over time, they kind of anticipated what it was, and I ended up as one of the researchers that ended up down there working with them.
Yeah.
And so those were very, very memorable with my time in. As far as I'm going to let you lead me at this point. Is there a direction you'd like me to go? Because I've got tons of experiences.
And I love it, because you and I, we can do multiple of these with all the things that you've been through. How about, let's talk about some of the 400. I know you were out there, and some of the things. Did you have memorable things happen at the 400 for you?
Of course.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I listened to Shane's interview with you last night, so it's fresh.
Yes.
His take of what had happened was a little bit different than mine. But I was full. He described me as very tired after my drive from
Right.
I was. But
Yeah.
my energy level was, the question was, well, did you want to go to sleep then, or because you just come such a long way? I'm like, are you kidding?
You're like, I'm here. Put me out there.
This is the hour. Unfortunately, it worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
And so as we three went down the track and he described the situation, it was just a matter of that is acting as though we think that's what it should be. Probably one of the juveniles. And then, of course, Shane walked in on it and got close. Mm-hmm. And he described to me its look. There's a beautiful illustration by Sibylla Irwin. And it was from what I consider her best situation regarding making an illustration. Mm-hmm. It was a juvenile male from Oklahoma, and this can be looked up in the BFRO because the report's in there.
Okay.
She, and I didn't get the report number on that one. I apologize for that, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is for viewers to go to, I want to make sure I get this right, SibyllaIrwin.com, and she's got all of her amazing artwork and witness script descriptions associated with that. So that's really, she's an incredible person. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, this illustration was fantastic because a man was looking at a approximate 6-foot individual peeking around a tree at him, called her and said, okay, let's start drawing. Mm-hmm. And so she drew this from his physical description of him looking at it and was able to go one-on-one with him.
Yeah.
And so that makes this even more accurate. And Shane pointed to that illustration as the one closest to what he had seen.
Okay.
7 or 8 feet away.
Right.
So that was an amazing night. And then we found out in the morning that they had come through that night. And there wasn't much regarding the recording, but there was a physical situation where one of the hand wipes was pulled out and a big fingers, not huge because it was probably a juvenile, finger smudged that hand wipe. And so that was the next day. We ended up going up the hill looking for the male. And these guys on 4-wheelers are pretty incredible going vertical. I'll just let it go at that. I was very pleased to get there alive, and there was much fun and happiness. And so we get up there, and I think we had the right vibes because the much fun and happiness seems to be a better situation for them than aggression and defense. Yes. Also, if it's true that some people feel, and I wonder about this, is it entirely possible that they may mimic our behavior? So if we go in defensive and agitated and nervous, if they mirror that, that's not the kind of greeting that you want to make.
No, no,
absolutely. So if we're not a threat and we're just curious and interesting, it seems to me like that would possibly provoke better interactions. So that's my theory of philosophy.
I agree with you.
And it's always worked for me. Not once in my 25 years of doing this have I had a one-on-one where I felt terrified or absolutely out of my mind, filled with fear. Right. It hasn't happened yet. They don't step out for me. I rarely get threatening vocals. And I finally got my first diurnal. I was speaking in Alabama this last year in June. 3 days later, I was in Indiana with a mother-daughter team. And by golly, if we didn't have one walk by a window, I was looking out 60 feet away. So I can talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Getting back to this situation with Shane and Randy, that night we came down from the hillside and checked the audio. Yes, there was audio there. And in the morning, Randy went through and shared with us a lot of taps, and they went through all the items on the tables, and they got through to the medical bag, and they zipped and unzipped it 17 or 18 times, which was quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you hear the cooler close. Well, what is going on there?
Mm-hmm.
Out 6 monster, appropriately, cappuccinos were missing.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they enjoyed themselves.
And they never shared or where they put those cans for years. But here last year, I was talking with Randy, and he said, "Hey, by the way, I found one of those cans, but the way they apparently opened it was not the way you'd think." And he went on to describe it. I've since forgotten it, but I'm sure he's got it written up in their notes.
Mm-hmm.
So the next trip that I had that was in 2019. Shane and I had met in 2018 after I came back from meeting with Meldrum and some of the gang down in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped by Shane's house, and then he invited me into the group regarding the research aspect and a few field trips. And I am just delighted and so appreciative of him for doing that, as our get-together times have been absolutely wonderful. And of course, he's embarking now on another adventure with Dr. John Morley regarding footprints. And I will say here now, one of the first things that Dr. Meldrum had mentioned with Stan Courtney out of Illinois, which I'm going to talk a little bit about before we're done, because he's got some incredible things in Illinois going on, and has. Anyway, Jeff had mentioned, Dr. Meldrum had mentioned to Stan Courtney, it is incredibly difficult to determine juvenile footprints of Sasquatches from humans. And that is why we have so much argument, emotion, and controversy on so many prints that don't get the full picture read. In other words, those are human. Totally ignored, and everybody walks away. Yeah. Well, let's consider the temperatures, when those prints were laid, where they are, how far away from a road they are, all those things. Yes. And then what's the individual variation of human prints versus theirs? We have narrow, medium, wide prints with us and them. And chances are theirs are even more extreme because of the, I'll say, aboriginal factor that they seem to be under phenotypically, physically, their physical capabilities.
Right.
So, and then if we go back to Sibylla's work, she will have individuals that look very human. And I'm going to give you a report number right now, and that is Washington report number. Where did it go? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Okay. It's a Scott Taylor report out of Washington. It's Gray Harbor County, and there are illustrations by the witness. And what had happened was this individual, large man, covered with hair, walked across the road, ran across the road chasing a white-tailed deer.
Okay.
And the driver was astonished, and the deer was gone, and the man parked, looking 20 feet away from this giant Sasquatch, older man, who turned, and he was backlit. So he looked like he had a domed head, but the backlit showed a round skull. So it was a hair formation. Out of the dome. Okay. And there was something interesting there, because what had happened. No, did I write that on the back page? No. Okay. Basically, it said, it looked at him, he waved to it. It gave him a grin of defiance, and primates will do this. If they show their teeth, it's a defensive. It's not a greeting happy, it's a defensive stress grin. And it responded with, she, ho, ha, is what it said to him. And then it did this, suggesting that he go, and then it turned and walked into the brush. And I thought that was one of the more interesting reports that I'd seen, and I wanted to bring that to their viewers.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And as far as other incidents that we'd had with Shane, me specifically, he'd mentioned that I got to keep a rock that was thrown
Yeah.
at me. That was wonderful. And after that, I'd walk to my vehicle and pow, a rock had hit the tree with incredible force with a big bang. You know, normally you'd think you'd be terrified, but when you read the literature, the incidences of people being hit by these rocks are so few.
They are.
Usually when they're hit, it's usually gravel or pea gravel or acorns, twigs.
Just little bitty things. Yeah.
Like maybe juveniles toying with you, seeing what you're going to do, things like that.
Absolutely.
But any time they wanted to take us out,
they could.
We'd be gone.
They could.
We'd be gone. And I know in speaking with Shane on the individual that he'd seen, the tracks associated with that one, if we're correct, and we believe we are, would be just a little over 10 inches. So that would put that this individual in that 5'2", 5'5", 5'7", somewhere in there, that type of height. And also body build, Shane thought, he told me personally, probably about 150 pounds, which means somewhere between probably all of that and maybe more because muscle's heavier than what we're familiar with.
Yes.
So, but who knows for sure because there's so many variables. As far as other things that had happened there, that was the bulk of it for me. But seeing the tracks, I was able to come in in 23 and I got to see all these amazing tracks from a different individual, probably who was at the time 6 inches.
Okay.
Now they were like a little over 10 inches. And Shane's kept, I don't remember exactly how many tracks he got from that set, but it was over 30, I think. Mm-hmm. So this man is amazing, as is Randy Harrington, who's got the Sensible Bigfoot Project. Shane's group that we're in is Ozark Mountain Sasquatch. Those two sites via YouTube really have a tremendous amount of information. And Randy's a go-getter, as Shane has described. Randy was picked for a reason, to work with Shane. And they have come a long way. And really, it's interesting because we're really just getting, in a sense, we're just getting started with this, hoping that there'll be other similar research capabilities around the country that can match.
Absolutely.
So often it's been said, especially with David Zegan, who's a buddy of mine as well, who you know quite well, I'm sure by now.
Oh, yes. Yes. Love David.
Absolutely. What a wonderful fellow. We have a tendency to just grab the tracks and put them up as trophies, and not a lot is done after that. And that's what interests me. I would like to do much more with them. So I'm hoping that with time, I'll be able to get to some of the locations where there's just massive amounts of individual variation. Because, if you look at Sibylla's physical illustrations, she's got some that are very, very, very human-like and have been described with standard-looking genitalia that males from Homo sapiens would have.
Yeah.
But there are others that look so gorilla. Their genitalia are so small. I just had an incident described to me a couple of years ago that happened. It would have been in the 90s. Oh, excuse me, early 2000s. And this fellow was ginseng hunting, and he happened along a great big nest, heavy wooden logs, but woven. And he's trying to figure out what in the world. And he looks up with his buddy, and they see a giant farmer with a monkey mask on. And he's coming down the hill.
Yeah.
And he's kind of freaking out because this guy apparently doesn't want us on his property.
Right.
Why was he just trying to scare us or what? And as it gets closer, it does a somersault roll 7 times down the hill head first and stands up behind the tree that he urinated at. And it was really checking that out and staring at them. By this time, his partner has totally lost it and run down the hill. And he told me, I can't physically go.
Yeah.
I can't move. I'm paralyzed with fear. That man has since stopped deer hunting. He's had some other incidences as well.
Right.
But he said the genitalia on this was so small you could barely see it, which prompts my question: how many different types of hair-covered giants are we working with, and do the footprints jive with their phenotype? If
Yes.
that's true, then you could expect a variation, probably an extreme variation in the footprints associated with different types of giant hair-covered unvertebrate primates that we're working with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, so since we're kind of on this, so as far as, do you believe that Dogman can be a variation of Bigfoot? Is it
absolutely
or something?
I don't focus on that subject much, and
I don't either, and I don't know a lot about it, but
every time I do, it brings up more controversy and aggression from other researchers.
Right.
My interest in it was, can I get more Sasquatch reports by entertaining Dogman interviews?
Right.
And I don't do a lot of them, but I've done some. And yes, I've gotten more Sasquatch reports that way. However, all Sasquatches don't have the same profile. And if you look at chimpanzees and orangs in particular, you will notice some have flat faces and some have very prognathic faces. If we take that extreme to whatever it is we're dealing with on the target species complex, then you're looking at, you may have some very, very, very ape-like creatures with canine faces. All it takes is recessive genes for ear placement, ear shape, and the look of that prognathic profile. I tried to work with some of Linda Godfrey's witnesses. And unfortunately, my name's not big. I'm private. I don't spend much time at conferences speaking or things like that. I do a few. I just did Alabama. I've done Tennessee. I'm more suited probably for some of the BFRO expeditions, or I'm invited to do Kentucky and invited to do Ohio, and I've done yours, and I've done Tennessee, and I've done Wisconsin. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was I hooked up with one witness, and she's, you can look at my interview in the book. I'm like, thanks, but I'd really like to do a deep interview with you.
Yeah.
And all I could get out of her was, she answered one question. And the question was, whatever it was you looked at, did it look at all like a giant baboon? She about wet her pants and said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it looked like. You're the first person to ask me that. And then it went on and on and on and on. So my theory is, we may well have if we've got such a variation in Sasquatches, some that are ape-like and some that aren't. Do they hybridize? Don't they? We don't know yet. We've got such a tiny sample on this. But is it entirely possible we've got some baboon activity that far exceeds anything verified? There was an original fossil species, Dinopithecus, I think, and this thing was man-sized. Is it entirely possible that something along those lines or bigger could be out there? Sure. Certainly. I've got a few witnesses that I trust completely that have claimed to see them. They act like baboons. They look like baboons. My question was, could people call that a dogman? Well, of course. Because what are baboons? They're dog-faced monkeys.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we've got stories of devil monkeys. We've got, as you know, all kinds of look. But if the Sasquatch is incredibly variable in the way it looks, and possibly in the way it acts, because it's governed by environmental factors, physical factors, and probably the people presence or how we can destroy places pretty quickly and literally turn it barren. And so all of a sudden that area is now deforested and we've screwed up the water system and who knows what.
Right.
Well, that probably was a place of present act or historical activity that's not there now. So,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely. Well, and on that subject, so, talking about their behavior and, because I'm like you, I've never had anything aggressive. I've never had anything, that would make me fearful. But like, I love to listen to Fred out of Alaska,
oh yeah,
Alaska subarctic.
yes.
Now, everything up there wants to kill you. So
No.
let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would be glad to. One of the first things I did was I wanted to find a place in Alaska. Okay, if you read Dr. Robert J. Alley's books on Ring Coast Sasquatch, what's the other one? Let's see. Brushes with Bigfoot. Sasquatch behaviors reported in close encounters, native and non-native perspectives. J. Robert Alley, right there. So
Okay.
anyway, if you look at, and Rob's a friend of mine. I got to meet him twice in Washington. I'm so glad to say, and I'm hoping to be working with him in the future as well. Anyway, long story short, there were some guys that were working with a private jet pilot. He had property, and the guys went up, got together, and associated with our good buddy with White Wolf Entertainment, and he basically had them in a spot, and he'd go up, and names are escaping me right now at the moment, old age, I guess. Anyways, I got to talk to 3 of the guys that worked on this property in Alaska all year long. Okay. And I asked them, okay, during the time you were there and had all kinds of, I'm going to say monkey shines happen, because there was obviously humor involved, because fun things would happen. A good example was they'd go with the can and then they'd shut the door, and then the door would be opened with a stick holding it open. They didn't do that. The Sasquatch were doing that. They would get handprints on the back window. One night they were hanging out, and all of a sudden something came to the edge of the cabin, and I don't know the setup. It might have been on the porch, but anyway, it hit the beer so hard that slid across the entire length of the cabin floor and hit the wall on the other side. Okay. My question was, how many times have you guys been hit with bad odor? In other words, a repulsive bad odor, which is often associated with aggression, defense, stress, etc. Not once had they picked up those odors.
Okay.
Not once. Were big rocks thrown at the skiffs? Yes, they were. And I'm glad you mentioned Fred, because Fred's a friend of mine. And 6 months ago, I decided, okay, I don't know Bo Diddley about Alaska, except I've got some good baseline because I've studied his books, but I wanted to know more. So I went in and I told Fred I was doing this, and I studied every report he put out. At the time was about 275. And I was looking at how bad are they demolishing the vehicles of these people.
Right.
Because if they're really angry at them, you'd think they'd destroy everything.
Yeah.
1, I couldn't find one skiff that was hurt badly. 2, I couldn't find one bush plane that was hurt badly. 3, there were 2 or 3 snowmobile incidences where they were twisted and destroyed and thrown. One was thrown vertically into a snowbank. In another case, a couple other cases, they'd pulled the rubber track off the snowmobile, so that had to be put back in order for the machine to work.
Right.
My gut feeling on this was, when you go into these areas, have a backup vehicle, damn it. Make sure that you've got somebody online that can come and rescue you if your vehicle's taken out. But it was amazing because very few of that. And I was also curious, how many of the buildings are destroyed? How many of the buildings are destroyed? And a lot of them were. But what was the key? The key was there's nobody in the building. Because when people are in the buildings aren't destroyed. At least in news reports. Yeah. So that was interesting. You got guys shooting through the wall, one particular, the most aggressive thing that I saw in his reports was a 12-foot male, if he measured that eye, was shot at through a wall. And then he ended up retaliating by taking a birch tree, slamming it into an 18 by 18 inch window, and anybody standing in front of that would have been taken out.
Right.
And he slammed it into the cabin, and then he pulled it out. But yet that same individual later was really interesting because they were standing around looking and careful, and all of a sudden he's throwing, he could have been a juvenile, throwing little rocks at their generator,
Okay, right.
And there were generators destroyed. There were other things destroyed, but this is almost always when the people aren't at the building, And there were cases where some of these Sasquatch were shot.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, I'll tell you, I didn't think the aggression level was what is described. I thought they're holding back and they're scaring the crap out of us, but they're ushering us out of the area. And a lot of these guys are unfamiliar with people for the most part because they're in the outback.
Right.
So a lot of time, I would think in some cases it's their first time with us.
Yeah.
So they, one woman was terrified because there was one acting aggressively and she just lost it. And she got behind a big rock and she just started crying. And the big fella came up, looked at her, and just walked around her and left. So, she was completely vulnerable. Another guy, there were just so many, I don't know. I've listened to all the reports once. I've listened to some of them 2 or 3 times, and you're getting me all excited about going back and listening again. So, is there aggression in Alaska? Certainly.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, does it go back to, like you were saying, of how they go into the woods, how we all go into the woods? Right. They're already on guard because of all the bear and the moose and everything else. They're always armed to the teeth, so it's like they kind of go in there, already on guard. And is that what makes them then react aggressively? And part of that, too, is the people's perception. That's always, you always have to consider that, because what you may consider aggressive, the next guy may not, Exactly. I mean, that's like the rock throwing. People are like, well, rock throwing's aggressive. When they're throwing little bitty rocks at you, that's not aggressive. It's really not.
No, agreed. It's curious.
Yeah.
I have friends that have made dumb mistakes with black bear. And one of the things they would do is agitate the black bear, throwing small things at them. And in some cases, it worked to their advantage. And there were several cases where they ended up getting in the car and driving away because things didn't go the way they hoped.
Right.
It's like when I got hit, when I had that tree hit real close to me with a rock on the 400, my reaction to this stuff is completely different than most people's. Mine is like, all right, can you do it again?
Yeah.
And there's so many layers to this. I mean, the first thing is, if we're dealing with a conventional ape species, and we may be in some cases, because some of these guys may actually be that, why don't we have a body, and why don't we have a general consensus on behavior, accepted and unaccepted? We don't, because we're dealing with more than one thing. So when somebody says, well, this is what happened to me, and then projects that to every situation, to me, that's a big wrong. But then that's what I know. Their vocal capability, they obviously have the ability to speak. And that means that their anatomy allows them to do this. Is that true with each and every species that's in this complex? I don't know. But I do know that some of them can. And I also know that Coco the gorilla could sign 1,000 words. If she had the anatomical capability to talk, she would have been able to put sentences together and speak. So right away, we are completely underestimating general, great apes as we know.
Right.
You know, our vocalizations, for example, there were some great whoops and great vocals that were taken to a primate center, and I forget the location, but the specialist was a gibbon specialist, and she listened to the vocalizations and she goes, "Wow, those are gibbon. Where did you get those?" I don't know. Actually, we got them from the mountains of the Rockies, and they're not gibbon.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I mean, and howler monkeys are supposed to be the loudest mammal in the New World, North and South America. Guess what? Wrong. So obviously Sasquatch are.
Right.
But you know, we've had people with voices that match theirs. You know, my friend Julie over in North Carolina, Newhari, she will have recordings where her husband is in the woods saying, "Julie," and she knows it's not him because he's not here. He's working that day.
Right.
And he has had the same experiences with his name being called, and so many other people in so many locations. And then, of course, the ability to imitate metal of some sort.
That's wild.
And if you listen to bonobo juveniles, one of the first things we were granted with in a study in 2002 in Virginia was we had one recording where it was a juvenile screwing up, and the old man apparently was correcting him or vocally letting him have it, because you get this metallic call, and then you know, and he'd come right back and just like, "Shut up, you're giving your location away," or whatever it happened to be.
Whatever it is they're doing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So what a wonderful, incredible mystery we have, and I'm just so glad to be a part of it.
I am too.
All the cool people we can meet.
And, you know, I wanted to touch on that because you talked about all the people, you know, that you've met over time and got to work with and that. And that's so important because that's one of the things I know for me. I've met people I would have never met before this.
Right.
They become family. You know, there's so many of them that, you know, you get to travel with and do things with. And I don't think we talk about it enough. You know, it's like, yes, we are investigating this creature, whatever it is, but the community that we build as we do that is incredible also.
Very key thought, very key focus. I agree 100%. Some of my best friends have repeat visuals. I've been invited to virtually every state in this country to stay with people.
Right.
And because I love meeting cool people. And if you're not into Squatch, but you're into another interest, that works too. And it might be that they turn into be interested in Squatch, you know.
Exactly.
What I'd also like to mention was I am too patient because I should get other things going. I should get things going in a more timely fashion, but there's so much on your plate. Some days you have to choose. And right now I'm in between jobs. And of course I've got a physical ailment that I'm working through. So standing in one spot for 4 hours is virtually impossible at this point. But anyway, so most of the jobs that I would entail right now would be from a chair. So I'd either be driving or I'd on the phone or doing artwork or editing photography or whatever. I'm also a wedding photographer and model photographer and a biological illustrator and a wildlife photographer. So, you know, it's too easy to get spread too thin.
Right.
But what I want to mention was I was invited to come down to Alabama, and I did that in June. On the 6th, I talked, and on the 7th, 8th, I was traveling. I ended up in Indiana, and I'm visiting a friend who I've gotten experiences with. And they get footprints, they get juvenile footprints in the garden, they get vocalizations from the ravine, and in the general area, when you get near the river system, they have found footprints, they found structures, they found rock stacks, they found other things that strongly suggest presence with twists and things like that. So anyway, that particular night, I get there fairly late and we have supper and I'm hanging out and she's got blinds on the window. And they're like, and taking, okay, strips of 10. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, it's not very long after supper, and it was a great supper. And we're catching up and talking, and we're soon going to go over to her daughters, and we're going to go hang out and listen and put some recorders out. And I'm hanging there, and all of a sudden, I see the husband walk by. And I'm looking, and he's heading to my left, and it's 1, 2, 3, gone. But I noticed a couple things. I noticed there's some white spots from the trees, which turns out to be flowers. They're in segment 2 on the window. This figure was in segment 4. So he was significantly higher than what turned out to be flowers. Mm-hmm. So I asked her, could you go outside and walk the edge of the road? Because I just saw something incredible. I thought it was your husband, but he came in and he was wearing a green shirt, and what I saw was uniform reddish brown, the color of a brick. Mm-hmm. Not a round head, and slender and tall and gliding. Only saw it from the top of the lower legs around the hips, but there was an arm swing. Yeah. And I had her, and it seemed like slow motion. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, did I hit? And she goes out and she walks. I can't see her. She's 5'1". So I have her come in and sit in my chair, and I say, I'm going to go do it and see if you can see me. So I walk out and I walk the distance. And the first thing I'm astonished with is how high up those, what turns to be white flowers are. They're 7 feet. So this individual had to be 8. Mm-hmm. Okay. I come in and I said, could you see me? She goes, just the top of your hat, barely. And I'm 5'7". So then she says, I said, I thought it was your husband, but he's not 8 feet tall, is he? and no. And then he didn't believe me, of course, which is understandable. He doesn't believe any of the things that happened there. Right. The next day we went out and we found a big path that she's heard vocalizations from. There was a marker across the road, and there was a rock stack. And in the past in that area, I've had a branch ripped out of a tree and dropped. I've found a footprint. So, I mean, these guys are super mobile and probably here and there at different times of the year. And we have no idea what the extreme situation is.
Right.
And so I'm just loving every minute of it. But I find it took me, I'm 68 years old. I started this when I was 10. It took that long to get a recognized visual.
Well, that's great that you got one, though. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, it is. I'm hoping for many, many more.
Right.
And I'm going to try to I've got some locations where I hopefully can make that happen. I'm invited to a place up north that is controversial, but I know the landowner, the neighbor, and numerous other witnesses. And I'll be interviewing all of them at length and trying to get it on paper. And hopefully I'll get, I'll have reason to be a little excited. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, we've hit our hour mark, Dan. I mean, you and I could talk forever, and I would love to have you back on. And, I've got some other things I'd like to talk to you about in the future. Sure. So, let's just at some point plan on you being back, because there's all kinds of things we can talk about. We get to talking about Bigfoot and we don't know when to end. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have you back on at another time. And I can't wait to hear what you're up to going forward.
I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you.
And interestingly enough, my next podcast will be with Brian.
Oh, sweet. I'm glad.
That's tomorrow night at 8:00.
Well, good.
And then I'm on, what am I on? Bigfoot Crossroads with Matt. And that's Monday. Now, when these are released, I have no idea. But I'm just letting you know that I'm still busy doing this. And like I say, I'll be in touch with Shane as we go, and Randy and other people who are out there doing it, because that's what we love.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Dan, and we will talk to you later.
Okie doke.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, tribe, that's all for this episode of the Bigfoot, Wildman, and Boogers show. Thank you for wandering the Missouri woods with us today. If you enjoyed today's encounter and want to keep these legends alive, don't forget to share and subscribe and like, of course. It helps us keep It helps us keep track of the wild and legendary encounters that make this place so special. We'll be back soon with more mysteries, more encounters, and maybe a few surprises hiding in the shadows. So until then, keep your boots muddy, your eyes on the tree line, and remember, show me your Bigfoot.